I am joined by my council members, my colleagues, my friends, Joe Buscaino, Mike Bonin, welcome to the committee.
Glad to be here.
First committee meeting here, and Mitchell Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you both, and appreciate it. And what's great is that you both have a lot of experience here in City Hall as well as dealing with public safety issues. And I think your input and experience is going to be incredibly valuable to this committee as well as to the entire city as a whole. So it's great to have you.
We'll dissuade you of that quickly.
Oh, I'm sure. There's no question. With that, we're gonna dive right in. We're going to start and open it up for general public comment. We do have a quorum. As stated as such in previous meetings, and it's been difficult in the past to have a quorum with a lot of the changes going on. So I look forward to regular quorums of this committee, which is critically important. We typically, if we don't have an actual quorum, it's communications from the chair, and therefore public comment on either general public comment or item specific doesn't meet the condition of the Brown Act. And therefore we have those items when they are sent on to council, we reopen it for public comment so we can actually get the public comment on the record. But with that, we have a quorum, so I'm delighted, and I anticipate having that in every meeting moving on. So with that, Noel Weiss, we have one public comment card. If anybody is here on general public comment, not on an item specifically, please feel free and make sure you fill out a public comment card and turn it into the clerk. Good morning.
Good morning, Council, and welcome new members. Mr. Buscaino, how are you, sir? Gentlemen, I'm here this morning and I'm going to try to come periodically because I'm concerned about this 25 million gallons of butane that is on the property owned by Rancho Holdings near the pier in San Pedro, two 12.5 million gallon tanks. I've given to Mr. White to distribute to all of you some proposed alternatives to what we have going now, which is clearly insufficient. We can't rely on hope. We can't rely on fate. I don't think Chevron wanted the Richmond refinery to blow. I don't think PG&E wanted the San Bruno pipeline to blow. Rancho is a subsidiary basically of PAA, which is the name escapes me at the moment. But in any event, what we've got here, we have, and they themselves, Plains All-American. And basically what we have, they themselves have had some problems in Canada and elsewhere. This is a little pimple on a big elephant, essentially Rancho situation. It is important that we have a debate, that we have a discussion about public safety alternatives, realistic. Barbara Boxer had a hearing in her Senate committee last month. She applauded the Contra Costa ordinance. You have a Contra Costa County ordinance. You have a copy of that in front of you. That's the kind of a thing. It's a competent risk management ordinance. And what you have before you in my packet that you have, and again, I'm going to be feeding you this information because hopefully we can get a motion introduced. One is Janice Hahn's motion that she introduced back in September 2010. Mr. Buscaino and or anybody else can introduce that motion. I advocate for that. There's a letter from Congresswoman Hahn dated July stating that to the EPA saying we needed to do it. This facility has been cited by the EPA for 6 violations in March. And we need basically to move forward. So we've got the risk management ordinance. We have a letter from Mayor Brooks to Mr. Buscaino. He needs to respond to that letter as Janice Hahn responded to the letter sent to her. The safe distance between the tanks, 400 feet for tanks of this size. These tanks are less than 100 feet. If one blows, the other's going to blow. We're going to have a problem. And finally, again, the Janice Hahn motion on Rancho. Thank you for your consideration. Hopefully we can move this forward. I appreciate it. I wish it was 3, but I'll take my 2. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ann, if you can please come forward, our final public comment card. I was going to attempt your last name, but if you could share that with us. I don't want to watch it. Good morning.
Hi there. My name is Ann.
You can have a seat if you'd like.
I wanted to...
On the mic.
I just wanted to speak to you really quickly about the hit and run report that you guys have received.
If you could, that's actually an agendized item. We can mark you for that item. That's
okay,
not general public comment.
I thought I marked...
So this is, it's not filled out. It just says general public comment. So we can call you back for that item, and it'll be 2 or 3 if you'd like. Okay. Okay, that'll conclude all the general public comment cards. That'll close public comment. With that, I've got some items on consent. Item 5, the Yasi Contracting Authority, will be on consent, and it'll adopt the CAO report. Unless any of my colleagues have any questions. Without objection, and then we're going to hear items 1, 2, and 3 we'll end up hearing together. Items 4 and 6, we'll hear those as well. And then we have a special 1. Do we have a special time for special 1?
The special meeting starts at 8:45, so you're able to call it up at any time.
Okay, I think that'll go quick, so if we can go ahead and take special 1 so we can get them out of here quickly, that'll be great. We'll temporarily convene the regular agendized meeting, and we'll open up the special meeting and turn to the special agenda. Mr. Clerk?
Yes, sir. Special item 1, communication from the Board of Police Commissioners relative to proposed change in the corporate ownership of U.S. Tow Incorporated, official police garage for Service Area 13, Newton, to Moshe Ben Dayan.
Good morning.
Good morning, council members. I'm Lieutenant Chris Waters. I'm the commanding officer of Commission Investigation Division. And this morning I have Detective Ben Jones, the city's official police garage coordinator. As you know, on June 18th, the Board of Police Commissioners recommended approval for the proposed change in the corporate ownership of U.S. Tow to Mr. Ben Dayton pursuant to the Los Angeles Municipal Code, Section 80.77.4E2. And that's with the condition that his wife, who's an owner of Santa Monica Body Craft, be eliminated as a conflict. Documents were provided by Mr. Dayton. However, the conflict still exists. And if you have any questions of myself or Detective Jones, we're here to answer them.
Great, thank you very much. Well, first and foremost, we view any even potential conflicts very seriously when it deals with OPGs. I know this one was what's considered minor, but it's still there. I talked to them personally as well. It sounds like it's almost there. That's almost resolved. Divesting of the ownership in a body shop that's not even under the owner's name. It's a wife, and it sounds like that's very, very close. But I agree that has to be completed and recorded first, and that documentation should be provided. In terms of the additional research on this potential purchaser, what was done, Mr. Jones, if you could walk us through some of that as well, and how they rate.
I'll have Detective Jones do that with the
Okay.
timeline. Go
All
ahead.
right, Detective Jones, Commission Investigation Division. They submitted a transition plan, which is in your package available to you. On April 11, 2013, we received DOJ clearance with no adverse history. We conducted an interview with the applicant on April 26, 2013, and requested additional documents to resolve a conflict. That was completed, and they turned it into us. We reached out to Santa Monica Police Department, which is where they're currently a contractor, and they gave them glowing reviews. We've also reached out to Beverly Hills Police Department, where they also work, and they've got glowing reviews. We contacted some of their other commercial vendors and did not identify any problems there. And the state, which doesn't really give an up or down, but they didn't give any negative information. So other than the conflict currently that exists, we're comfortable with them.
Great, excellent, thank you. Any questions for my colleagues? Because what we'll go ahead and do is we'll hold it in committee until we resolve the issue and have that on file and a recorded document. And as soon as that's provided to the commission, you can forward that to my office. We can either reschedule for committee or waive it to council, depending on what the commission, Mr. T-Fank and the others would like to do. We'll take the direction from the department. You can let us know on that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much. I believe that'll conclude, that'll be the action of this committee, and we'll hold that until that's resolved.
Okay.
With that, that should conclude the special committee. We'll go ahead and adjourn the special and reopen the regular scheduled Public Safety Committee. With that, if we could take items 1 first.
Item 1, Fire Department and ITA to present a verbal report relative to recent Metro Fire Communications dispatch incidents.
The Good morning.
Morning.
So we've had a series of issues with dispatch and the CAD systems in the fire department in the beginning of the month go down. And so I wanted to get an update from the fire department on exactly what's happened, what occurred, give us the details, where are we at in resolving that, and then we can further ask questions from the committee if we could.
Certainly. Well, I'll go ahead and open up. My name is Ted Ross, and I'm Assistant General Manager with ITA. And so since this incident was specific to the computer-aided dispatch system, I don't mind going ahead and taking the lead and describing a little bit. So on July 5th, around 4 p.m., a call came in and they were trying to dispatch on it. And the system, the computer-aided dispatch system, hung up, and so they weren't able to process it through the CAD. They then switched over into a manual mode or radio mode and went over into what we call the ECAD system in those events. They were in that situation, that status, for about 30 minutes. Technically, it was at 4:38. The system was fully restored, and they were able to continue processing in the normal CAD mode as opposed to using the manual radio watch mode. That incident occurred again on July 7th, which was be a Sunday, from 3:18 to 3:37. And our ITA staff were working very hard to troubleshoot to identify what would cause that issue. To give a bit of a summary, too, it occurred again on July 18th, and then the resolution was this last Saturday. At the cause of it there's a lot of logic that's put into the computer-aided dispatch.
On the July 18th, how long was the system down then?
Sure. So it was 8:20 to 8:50 a.m.
Thank you.
At the cause of it, there were a lot of changes made in the logic of the system coming from the realignment process a couple of months ago. And I don't want to get too technical in it, but when it came down to it, there are certain rules that were put in place in the CAD that had to do with task forces and attributes for various units. And based on the realignment, those rules were violated in a very specific incident as it related to rescue cushion, jaws of life, etc. And so when there was a dispatch made to a unit, and that unit was already dispatched, and it moved to a secondary unit, and it held those specific attributes, then it could cause an issue when it came to the logic in the CAD. It was not identified during the comprehensive testing process when it was rolled out, and so on these dates, that specific incident actually occurred, and that's what caused the hang-up in the CAD. And so after very substantial troubleshooting, so the July 18th situation that happened on a Thursday, that was certainly the last straw on our part. We devoted all staff to it. We had staff there 24/7 to be on site. We had all logs set up, and within a day or so, we identified exactly the cause of it. We worked very closely with fire department on the testing on that following Friday, which would be the 18th, and then we waited until Saturday morning, a quote quiet time, to try to go ahead and implement the fix into the system. We encountered some issues implementing the fix, but we had it in by the end of the day, and we haven't had any issues since. And so that was what we wanted to be able to summarize.
As we're adding on different modulars with vehicle locator systems and different technologies and overlays into these systems, do we anticipate, do we think that might have caused any of this?
Like the automatic vehicle location work, et cetera? We don't believe so. We do believe those were independent. One thing regarding the dispatch process, it's a fairly technically complicated process. You've got multiple vendors. You've got Zetron for radio, AT&T and Trado for phone switches. You have the computer-aided dispatch system itself. We do not believe the work on AVL impacted that. However, that impacts other items in the entire ecosystem. And one thing we certainly want to be very specific about is we have encountered issues, and we have logged a whole variety of issues with the ProQA triage software. We had a couple hundred issues logged on that in the last 6 or 7 months. About 13 issues with Zetron. When it comes to the computer-aided dispatch system itself, it's relatively rare for that to happen. The last incident that one would identify with it was in January, and that actually came from an AT&T net clock that was provided. So really, since February of last year, we have had really only one incident, this string of incidents for the CAD itself in this last July. However, there is definitely other incidents and other issues that occur in the full landscape of what we would consider to be the dispatch process.
Okay. Turning over to the fire department then, under all these incidents, if you can walk us through from a public safety perspective. System goes down, somebody's on the call. This is about an hour and a half of downtime on these 3 incidents alone. What happens? What happened in these particular situations? What happens when the rep is on the phone, dispatcher's on the phone with a caller, and the system locks up? And if you can walk us through all of that from dispatcher's perspective and then from a public safety perspective as well.
Definitely. Hi, Dave Yamahata, Deputy Chief, Los Angeles Fire Department. Before turning it over to Battalion Chief Carlos Calvillo, what I want to acknowledge is that Fire Department and ITA has been working very closely in making sure that we understand what's causing these problems. ITA has spent countless hours in supporting us, so I just want to acknowledge ITA's support in doing that for us. I have here today is Battalion Chief Carlos Calvillo, who is one of our battalion chiefs assigned to our dispatch center, and he happened to be working on a couple of days where we had a system failure, and he can walk you through basically starting when normally what happens is one of our call takers experiences a problem and notifies the floor captain and then notifies the battalion chief. At that point, then he can go through walk you through exactly what our process is to try and ensure that we continue to provide the same level of service to our people of Los Angeles.
All right. Thank you.
Good morning, council members.
Good morning.
The process we go through is we're going into ECAD, is what we call it, has developed over the last several months as it happens, and or planned event or an unplanned event. And each time we do it, we get experience that makes us better for the next time we go into it, as we go back and we look at what we could have done to operate better each time. The process when the system fails is the floor captain will call all 26 dispatchers to the floor. In addition to that, all 3 captains are on the floor, and myself come onto the dispatch floor. We then, at that time, open up a alternative phone line to all the fire stations and let everybody know that we are now operating in the manual mode and that all communication will be done over the radio. At the same time, on all 3 of our dispatch channels, that information is given to the resources that are already in the field. We take a minute or so to allow ITA a chance to reboot the system in the production CAD, which is the frontline CAD, to see if we can restart it and in short order bring that system back online so that we don't have to go into the manual mode. If that does not work, then we actually fall into what we call the ECAD, if you will, emergency CAD / manual mode. We take the information from that production CAD, transfer it into this ECAD, and then begin the dispatch process in the emergency CAD system. We then continue to operate from the floor. All of the communication to the fire stations that we would normally, a call is taken in from a dispatcher, he processes that call, he then, or she sends it to the fire station via a digital voice communication, and then a dispatcher would normally follow that up on the radio. Well, that connection to the fire station is no longer available, so we don't do that. We aren't able to communicate with resources via the MDC, which is normally a electronic message to the apparatus where they can actually see the information for the incident. So all the communication then with field resources is done over the radio. And until ITA then is identifying the issues with the production CAD, and until they say that they're ready to bring that production CAD back online, we'll work through the process in emergency CAD, and when they say they're ready to go, we actually are then transfer back into production CAD.
Okay. Just with that, during the 1 to 2 minute reboot that you're talking about, what happens when the dispatcher's actually on the phone with a caller during that 1 to 2 minutes?
The actual phone call time doesn't change. If you're calling and I'm a call taker, you and I are still on the phone, and I'm going to be able to communicate with you, and I'm going to be able to identify what your issues are. That moment in time when we're actually between the 2 systems, until we actually go on to the ECAD, there's a holdup on the floor in terms of getting the call out to the resources in the field.
Okay. Excellent. And one final question. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. We've had an issue over at Mount Lee with the systems going down recently as well, and various issues, in fact. So severe where at one point in time, because it didn't seem that we had good protocols and systems in place, that the mayor's office, the mayor actually took the authority and the function out of, temporarily out of ITA and brought in engineering to oversee it to ensure contractors were up there fixing the problem because they kept happening. We couldn't identify exactly what was happening at Mount Lee. Mount Lee controls our radio systems, and when those go down, they have to rely on CAD and electronic dispatch only, and there's no other communication. What happens if they both go down at the same time? So, in other words, you have this issue, they're down for a half an hour, and you're relying strictly on ECAD, you're relying strictly on radio systems for dispatch, but the radio's down because Mount Lee's down. What then? What's the third backup?
For us operationally on the dispatch floor, prior to ECAD, ECAD is, I've been at MFC for 8 months. ECAD has come on since I've been there, so it's been online for about 6 months. And prior to ECAD, they were what they used to call the manual mode. The dispatch floor would actually operate with paper, pencil, and resource status would be monitored on literally a pegboard. The call would come in, the call taker would take that information, walk it over to somebody who's now operating on a laptop, the information is entered, and then the laptop would identify the resources that would need to respond to that incident. That information would then be carried over on paper to the dispatcher, and who would be working with somebody who is monitoring, hey, are these resources even available or not to respond? And then they would identify and go through a priority list of who's available from what the computer's recommending, and then send those resources to the incident. So that was the original old manual mode, and then with ITA's help, they've developed now this ECAD system, which is a backup to the production CAD.
So if they both go down and Mount Lee's down, you fall back on the pegboard, if you will, and phone communication.
Mr. Chairman, I happen to not manage the radio side of it, and so I wouldn't be able to speak authoritatively as to whether they have, because hypothetically one would want to be using handheld radio devices between there, so I couldn't tell you exactly the impact of if we had a situation where the dispatch system was down and then Mount Lee was also down at the same time. But if you'd like, we could certainly get that information back.
That'd be great, if you can get back to me on that. Perfect. Turn it over to any of my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for bringing this critical issue in the forefront here. Maybe a question for ITA. Do we have a vendor that we can hold responsible for in this delay and hold the specific vendor accountable? And two, is this an isolated incident only for the fire department? Do we foresee any issues on the LAPD side of 911 calls?
So for number one, being at this specific incident was the computer-aided dispatch system that is developed, has been developed within the city of Los Angeles. We don't have a vendor we could hold personally responsible. But as I mentioned before, for many of the other issues that occur in the dispatch process, whether it's the ProQA triage system, the Zetron radio system, Intrado phone switch, etc., we do have vendors we do hold responsible. For this item, it's not. Secondly, when it came to your question in regards to impact on police, it did not have any impact on the police dispatch process.
Thank you.
And also, let's just take just a moment to reaffirm, we on the ITA side, as well as I know I speak for LAFD on this side, we don't believe any incident or any occurrence is at all acceptable. So we don't take this lightly in any way, shape, or form. Certainly as a citizen of Los Angeles, I could appreciate it could be my call, it could be a relative's call, it could be anyone's call, and we don't want there to be any impact on its system. So we're taking quite a few proactive steps to try to avert this from ever happening in the future.
Thank you. You mentioned that the last incident was on the 18th. I've been hearing from a couple different folks in the field that there was a DWP worker who was trapped at a confined space at Playa Vista on Saturday, and that the system was down then. Is that true?
Right.
Yes, sir.
So we had an issue on the 5th and the 7th, then we had it occur again on the 18th. And then on that Saturday morning, we were actually bringing the system down to implement the fix. And then as we were running into issues with that, we maintained it in manual mode. So that was actually self-inflicted, so to speak, for us to be able to migrate the fix into the production system. So it may not necessarily have been that outage, so to speak, but it was our attempt to implement the fix into it. But I could certainly let the fire department speak.
And how long was the system down on Saturday?
Yeah, that particular day, the
30 minutes.
system went down at 8:21 in the morning, and we didn't bring it back online until 5 p.m. There's several reasons for that. Some of it was some of the decisions that I made actually on the floor at the time to give ITA the additional time to go back and run the test on the upgrades that they had made so that we can have a better assurance that this won't happen again. And we were already operating in the ECAD mode, and I wanted to give them that time. Additionally, when you come out of, you've now created all these incidents in the emergency CAD system. We actually ran 500 calls during that time. We have to take that information, and I actually pulled some people back to another portion of the floor so that they can go back and retype all that information into the frontline CAD so that we didn't lose it in case we had to go back into the ECAD. So some of those were some operational decisions we made on the fly. When the system went down, we went through the process of retrying to boot it. At that time, they realized that the production CAD was not going to be able to function, and they weren't able to give me a specific time of when that was going to happen. So we began to lean forward and develop a system so that we can function for 24 hours on the dispatch floor with the staffing levels that we had.
Yeah, the fact that it was down all day, that's what I'd heard, and that wasn't clear from the earlier testimony. I think we had the impression it was a shorter period of time, so I'm glad that got clarified. You mentioned earlier that when the system was down, you called other guys in from the floor, the folks who were on platoon duty, right?
Yes, sir.
That happens every time that you go into ECAD?
Yes, sir. And realize some of that is when they do system upgrades, we typically want to do that at 5:45 in the morning when we have low incident numbers, and we'll call all the members of the floor even for that, for a planned event. And then, of course, when it's an unplanned event, we bring everybody to the floor also.
Hasn't there been talk of eliminating that 24-hour platoon duty system and putting folks on a 40-hour system? And wouldn't that be a problem?
In reference to that, Council Member, yes, that is. That's actually a direction of the EERC for the CAO and the LAFD to move forward on trying to negotiate the 40-hour work week at our dispatch center. When you look at the staffing level, the issue of having 26 people down there, it's not a matter of having individuals on 24 hours. It's a matter of having sufficient staffing to meet the needs, whether it's for a planned event or for an unplanned event, such as a system failure and so forth. So what we're looking at when we're in our negotiations is identifying a sufficient number of personnel and then having some support staff that if the system does go down, that we have the ability to surge and increase the staffing at our dispatch center.
Have we looked at other big city departments to compare how often their systems go down and how much worse we are or how we compare?
I believe there were a set of reviews and interviews with a variety of other departments, especially in light of looking at other CADs. As you may remember, there's been a look at fire station alerting, and there was an RFP recently on that. There was an RFP in process when it comes to looking at other CAD systems. So I think they've been evaluating various other departments. Some of them do them well. I believe some of them do it less well. And so I think that's been an ongoing discussion over the last 2 or 3 years between both fire department, IT, as well as others.
I'd be interested in knowing how it compares.
And as you're aware, Council Member, we are trying to move forward on developing an RFP for a new CAD.
Yeah.
As you're aware, our system is over 30 years old, and it is in time for a need to be replaced. So fortunately, we've been able to obtain funding to move forward on replacing our current CAD. So that'll be coming forth in the near future.
Another item worth briefly noting is both the mayor's office and LAFD are partnering to bring in an external consultant to be able to evaluate not just the CAD process, but the entire dispatch process.
Is that the sitcom contract that we just approved moments
Yes.
ago?
Yes, exactly.
So we very much look forward to come in and help assess a 1, 3, a 5-year strategy across all the different elements, more than just even the CAD.
And just one last question. It almost borders on trivia, but when you guys are in ECAD and you're using a pegboard, are you actually using golf tees?
That's actually our backup to the backup. Fortunately, with the development of ECAD, the pegboards has been put to our third option. If the initial system goes down and then ECAD goes down, that is our fallback.
Cutting edge.
And it still works.
Okay, thank you. Just one question with respect to the fix from Saturday's incident and notwithstanding the RFP that's out for a new system, is there a regular way to check the system, maybe once a day, once a week, so that with this upgrade? So my question is to you, Mr. Rostam, is there a way for ITA to test the system on a regular basis until, moving forward?
The short answer, yes. So first and foremost, we've been proactively identifying and researching if the realignment itself has any other potential data anomalies. One of the tricky aspects is when you look at the logic, it becomes very difficult. It's a subset of a subset of a subset, and when that happens, it causes an issue. So first and foremost, anytime a change is introduced in the system, we work very closely with Fire to test thoroughly before it even gets into production. But even now for the items in production, we are proactively analyzing and identifying if there's any other potential anomalies that we could go ahead and prevent. And especially based on the incidents that occurred this July, it rattles us as much as anybody. We're going to sit down and totally rethink and readdress and identify and scope out this logic. Part of the issue is that the more time we spend on the stability, the less time will become available for some of the new projects, the new initiatives. So we're trying to strike that balance with our partners at Fire Department, but we certainly believe it's extremely important to have a stable, robust system that has multiple failovers in which these incidents never occur.
Okay, so you feel confident with your response and evaluating this. You feel confident moving forward?
I would say yes,
Okay.
but confidence is one of those things. You feel confident until something happens, and you say, "Oh boy," right? But we are unwavering in our dedication to having a stable system. What wavers us is that this was already pre-tested before it moved into migration. So obviously the testing that was performed across ITA and LAFD staff was inappropriate because it didn't cover this scenario, or this scenario would have shown in the testing process. So we want to do a recommitment, a reaffirmation, refresher training for staff on site when these incidents do occur. If they occur, we're going to readdress our testing processes, partnering up with Fire, as well as reevaluating any logics or change. We had 72 changes made to the system since January. And as you can imagine, it's quite a bit to keep up with. And it does add quite a bit of functionality and capability to our dispatch process, but also adds a little more instability, and it could cause these types of situations to occur. So in some ways, this was a self-inflicted wound. We made a change in the realignment, and that change caused this issue. So these are the types of things we want to address and have visible before we ever put this code into production.
Thank you. Great. No, thank you very much. And there's a lot of good information that's come out of this. In fact, I want to applaud the department. One of the things that we experienced in the past was not only a lack of communication and a notification of when these happened, and it was not for done on purpose, but more so on design. It was just always that way. We've had a committee and a council that is more interested in knowing exactly when systems go down, what's happening, what's the backup, what are the incidents that were impacted or affected, if any at all, at the time. And I'm now have been receiving regular notifications as they happen in real time, and I truly appreciate that. And then we can ask questions. And what that then does is not only shed some light on it, but then enables us to look for and work with various departments for opportunities for funding to fix these issues. A great example is the sitcom contract that was just approved in the other item to move forward on the analysis. That analysis is supposed to take, I believe, about 3 months. So if you can come back with your findings once that's done and let us know what's happening with the dispatch, we'll go ahead and schedule it when you're ready, but we'll give it about 90 days. if that's reasonable, and if you can continue to notify us when these situations occur so we can ensure that we have all the resources dedicated to this. It is the backbone of public safety, is the communication systems. And so we want to make sure that not only we have the best and the brightest, but they have the resources that they need. So appreciate you coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go ahead and take item 2 and 3 together. I know that I believe most of the people in the audience that are here today are here on that item. So I appreciate you coming out early this morning and you being here, and also appreciate your patience as we went through some of the fire department issues. Those were critically important as well, as you've heard, and so I appreciate that. I see a lot of familiar faces here as well. We'll go ahead and hear from the department first. What I'd like to do, if I could, is hear from the department and then go into public comment and then ask the department back up for my colleagues to then ask questions, if I could. So, good morning.
Good morning, Councilman.
Thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you. Would you just like me to begin?
Why don't we go ahead?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah, as you know, this report was submitted through the commission to the council. We're hearing it today. I would say that the LA Weekly and Councilman Buscarino's motion kind of created some work to analyze this and really put it into context. And it's a complicated report. There are a lot of complexities to it. There's a lot of statistics and data. And as you know, with statistics and data, depending on how you interpret those statistics and data, you can tell a different story. I think what we found here is that of the accidents that are reported, 46% of the accidents are hit and runs. But we also showed that over half of the accidents that occur in the city are not reported. For example, property damage only, freeway accidents, those aren't reported. So we did a comparative analysis between 5 other cities that are as close as to LA as we could get to kind of bring it into context. And I think that the LA Weekly article that was written, I think we put it into context. But that's not to say that we're not concerned and we didn't discover something that is not acceptable to us, and that is that we have 20,000 hit-and-run accidents a year. And that's not acceptable. Our responsibility is to protect the public, and we have to do a better job at reducing that number. But let me put that number, the 46% of all the accidents, which is 20,000 a year, into context. 83% of those 20,000 are property damage only. 1% involved a fatal or severe injury. 3% are pedestrian related, and 2% are bicycle related. Now, what we did find is that the upward trend, while hit and runs are about 20,000 a year and going down when you look at 5 years, the upward trends are bicyclists and pedestrians. And even though the numbers in terms of percentages are low, those are human beings, and that's something that we have to take very seriously. And I think that there's some strategies, some definitive strategies that we can do, such as this. As you know, Councilman Englinger created a motion, which was a state bill, which I think just passed the Assembly, is in the Senate now, to extend the statute of limitations on hit-and-run accidents. And that's great. That will help. But I will tell you that the real issue with the hit-and-run accidents is their civil compromise, meaning there's really no teeth in any type of deterrent for somebody to not run from a traffic accident. I mean, a hit-and-run takes 2 things. It takes a traffic collision, and it takes a choice by a driver to flee. So there's got to be some accountability on the part of Angelenos to take responsibility for what they do. So in addition to the Assembly bill that is occurring right now. We are writing legislation to put some more teeth in the punishment for hit and runs, similar to what it is for a DUI. It's much less than a DUI. I mean, you can get in a traffic accident today, flee, and not even be charged criminally, which is, I think, absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it doesn't give anybody any incentive to stay and have responsibility, other than their own civil, pride and compassion. The other thing is education. When I get a BlackBerry every time there's a fatality involving a pet or a bicyclist or any major accident that we have, and I see many times seniors in crosswalks killed, and it's a hit and run. So I think there's an orientation, there's an education, there's also some engineering that can be done in terms of painting, lighting, those types of things, and certainly enforcement. As you know, if you read in the report, I think we have 676 traffic enforcement officers. But that's a little misleading because every single patrol officer has a responsibility to enforce traffic laws, to write tickets, to look at areas where there are problems and get involved in problem-solving efforts such as lighting or signals or crosswalks, that type of thing. So even though there's 676 officers solely dedicated to traffic enforcement, it's really the whole department that has that responsibility. And of the Category 1 hit-and-run cases, those are cases where there's actually follow-up, some clue that a detective or investigator can run down. 47% of those are cleared. Now, when you look at the total hit-and-run accidents, 20% are cleared. So how does that measure up to our other crimes, our other disciplines? Well, for example, robbery. Stealing somebody through force, somebody's property through force or fear. The clearance rate, the year-to-date clearance rate on that is 31%. The clearance rate for all hit and runs is 20%. The clearance rate for burglaries is 16%. Larceny is 13%. Vehicle theft is 8%. And total Part 1 crimes is 18%. Is that acceptable? It's never acceptable. We always want to do better. But the clearance rate for the hit and runs is somewhat similar to what that is. And I think you would all agree that a robbery, we want to have more clearance on robberies than we do hit and runs. I mean, because that's targeting crime. So I hope that provides some context. I don't think you want me to do a deep dive into the statistics because you've read the report, but Mike and I are very happy to answer any of your questions. And I'd just like to really praise Officer Mike Gregg. He's done the lion's share of the research and the work and the writing of the report, and he's just blue chip.
Great. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Joe Buscaino, who's the author of the motion, originally to open this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for seconding this motion. Mr. Bond and Mr. O'Farrell, last year I introduced a motion that resulted in the report that we're about to discuss today. And I received reports from the media and elsewhere about what they considered a disturbing trend in the city of Los Angeles with a high number of hit and runs incidents in the city of Los Angeles, and a number of them that were going unsolved. And out of concern of these numbers and to assist the police department in finding solutions to this problem, I called the LAPD to report to this committee and the council on what the current situation we're facing as a city concerning hit and run crimes. And as you heard from Chief Downing, thank you, sir, for your comprehensive report. It's a comprehensive report. You're looking at 83% of hit and runs in the city were property damage only. 12% of hit and runs resulted in complaint of pain. Less than 1% of collisions resulted in a serious injury. 0.15% result in the death of the victim. But to me, whether an injury occurred or not, a hit and run victim is a hit and run victim. And I want to, obviously, we clearly have a problem on our hands. And my question, Chief Downing, and one of the criticisms that we've received of the methodology that was used in this report, can you just share with us the factors that that influenced the numbers and how the statistics were prepared for the other cities?
Sure.
Other cities LA was compared to.
Yeah. I think you look at the criteria for taking a report. I mean, we take a report when there's an injury or a crime. We don't take a report when there's property damage only. And that would probably constitute we believe half of the number of collisions that occur in the city aren't reported because of that factor. The other is jurisdiction. We don't take reports of traffic collisions that occur on freeways. Other agencies do. So there were a lot of factors. Vehicle miles traveled.
Right.
I know that that's a hot button for some people because they will say, well, who cares, about how many vehicle miles were traveled. But in our city, we travel a lot of vehicle miles when compared to the other 5 cities that we looked at. So we had to look at some type of comparative analysis with big cities to see where they fall. So those were really the factors.
Why was the issue of population used in the methodology? I know you guys focused on the vehicle miles traveled.
Why did we focus on vehicles mile traveled?
Right, and not on just general population.
Because I think we were looking at roadway, the free flow of traffic, the number of streets we have, the number of cars that we have as a multiplier, the congestion that we have. Most of the hit and runs are property damage only. A lot of hitting parked cars, backing up into poles, that type of thing. When you look at the kind of the parking problem that we have throughout the city, there are a lot of cars parked on the street. What can we do to alleviate some of that?
And sure, the prosecution level, can you elaborate on the suggestions offered on the stiffened fines, as you indicated? I know my colleague Mike Gatto introduced the bill that's currently in State Senate right now. And I know we supported it, and I second Mr. Englander's motion on that. In comparison to the DUIs, can you just elaborate more on what would you project? And I know it's in the reports.
Sure.
I'd like to hear from you.
No, happy to. I think that there's for somebody who gets in an accident, they know they can get away with it without too much prosecution punishment. They know that there's a civil remedy for this. There's no teeth in it. It doesn't even meet the standard of a DUI. So I think that there's got to be an accountability factor as well. And it's not just the police that have to do this. This is the communities, the community police advisory boards, the neighborhood councils, the Chamber of Commerce. I think the whole of government, whole of community needs to get involved in this problem. We can do much better than as a police department, I think we can do better. I think we can do better enforcement, we can do better education, I think we can look for opportunities to do better engineering, and we will do that. In fact, we have quarterly meetings. I'm the traffic coordinator. We have quarterly meetings with our traffic captains of the 4 traffic divisions. We had one yesterday as quarterly. It wasn't planned because of this, it just happened to fall. And they all received a copy of this report. We spent about an hour and a half talking about it. And people do what you count. And this will be comp statted, and I think there's a lot of improvement.
And it's great to see in the report how you're going to have a greater influence of CompStat in solving this problem. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from the community as well. I know we have a number of individuals here for public comment as well.
Great, thank you. And I know I have a lot of questions and concerns that I'll get into after. I want to hear from the public that have come out here this morning first to make sure we get through all their comments and allow them time as well and not rush them out. And I know we'll continue this conversation after this committee and council as well, but I've got a number of concerns over this. And so with that, if you could hang out, go have a seat. We'll bring you guys back up. I really, truly appreciate you both coming here this morning. I've got a number of comment cards here that I would like to go through. One in particular I'm going to hold for last because while Dan Rosenberg filled out a comment card, he was actually here not as a member of the public, but as an expert advocate that I asked to come. And so I'm going to ask him to speak and some of his findings and reports in a little more depth after public comment as well. But with that, and if you want to come back up, we'll open it with you. And if you want to come back up, we'll open it with you. But if I'll bring a few up at the same time. Eric, is it Bruins? Just reading the writing. I apologize if I get any of the names wrong. Thomas Flexer or Fleder? Flexer looks like an X. You want to come up as well? And Steve Isaacs? Steve Isaacs? Great. Good morning.
Good morning.
You can start in any order. We'll let Ann start since she was made the first.
Hi there.
Morning.
I read your report and I don't really have a lot of...
If you can speak into the mic so we could just hear you, I'm sorry.
I read through the entire report and I really don't have a lot of confidence in your statistics. I was hit by a very angry, aggressive driver a couple of years ago. Actually, it was in 2009, and you guys finally, the LAPD, finally took a report this past February. So it also wasn't included in the report because I only suffered very, very minor injuries that didn't meet the criteria of the that the LAPD took into account in their report. That said, I also wanted to point out that whoever typed up the agenda for this particular meeting owes the public an apology because they used the phrase hit-and-run accidents, and a hit-and-run is not an accident. A hit-and-run is a crime. There's no such thing as a hit-and-run accident. There's no such thing as a murder accident or a child rape accident or a bribery accident. It's a crime. It's a crime. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming this morning as well. Appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Eric Bruins. I'm the Planning and Policy Director at the LA County Bicycle Coalition. I think that Ann touched on exactly a point, which is that hit and run, when it's a violation of your body, it is a violent crime, and the recommendations are very clear that we need to treat it that way, both in terms of reporting, in terms of level of seriousness, and in terms of penalties. And so I think that that's kind of the common theme through a lot of the recommendations. I do want to touch on, the methodology issues, where the report basically says that, LA is not as bad as, or is just as bad as other cities. When you actually look at how likely, as an Angelino, you are to be injured in a hit and run or killed in a hit and run, it's twice as likely as cities like New York, Seattle, and San Francisco, based on the numbers that were produced in the report. If you just basically do the math like you would any other crime, which is is per capita. And so I think that, yes, we are a more motorized city, but the reason that LA consistently tops the charts in injuries and fatalities among vulnerable users is because we tell ourselves we're a motorized city, and therefore we don't deal with pedestrian and bicycle safety issues nearly enough. We have a city that's designed for cars, but but people walk and bike here because we are the densest city in the country, based across the entire city. And so we need to treat ourselves that way and really reorient the way that we look at how people are interacting in public space. So we really encourage you to add to the city's legislative agenda to enhance the penalties of hit and run. I think they should be equal to DUIs, such that there is no incentive to flee the scene. If you have nothing to hide, you have no reason to flee. And also deal with the reporting issues. And I think other people, as they talk about their stories, are going to talk about the interactions with the department where they don't feel like they were treated seriously, like they were violated. And that's really what this is about. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Morning.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Open with your name. I'm sorry.
Yes, my name is TJ Flexer. I'm from Orange 20 Bikes, bicycle retailer. I get asked all the time if cycling is safe, and it's a difficult question for me to answer, in all honesty. Yes, it is safe. I don't believe that cycling poses nearly as much of a threat to the environment or to individuals, dogs, cats, people alike. We all live kind of terrorized by cars, and driving is a privilege, not a right, and I think that the privilege is thoroughly abused, and that when somebody is in an accident, if a car hits a cyclist and flees the scene, and that's regardless if it's just property damage or if it's injury. If a person flees the scene thinking that, well, that they seem like they're okay, they're going to survive, they fled the scene, and I think that the prosecution for that should be considerably higher, and it should be treated as a very serious crime. If the driver was to pull over and offer assistance, and we all agree that we can keep going our way, then no harm, no foul. But it's yes, it's quite often. It's a better option for people to flee the scene as opposed to stick around and face the consequences, whether that's violation of they don't have insurance, or that they oftentimes are drunk, DUI, but they know that they should flee the scene so that they can avoid being prosecuted fully. I think that the charge should be vehicular manslaughter and or attempted vehicular manslaughter, regardless of the extent of the injury, because I do feel as though it's that serious of a crime and a violation of someone's civil duty to stop, pull over, and aid and assist in the event of an accident. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Steve Isaacs. I'm here to join my voice with my fellow cyclists in concert. I own a car. I'm a motorist, but I'm also a cyclist. I believe the future of my personal future is that of a two-wheeled commute around the city. I enjoy it more. I think it's going to be the future is going to arrive on two wheels. And so, but that does involve a modicum, a large amount, frankly, of risk, of challenge, and of a personal threat. And so I would like to join my voice with my fellow cyclists and ask for that a hit-and-run incident, not an accident, true, well said, that an incident be regarded as a violent crime and not as a traffic incident. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. The next speakers are Nona Farnodo, is that correct? Followed by Mark Marin.
Thank you.
And we'll save, and Don, come on up. Don Ward as well. Yeah, sure. Why not? Thanks, Dan. Morning.
Good morning. I would also like to agree that we do need to work on stiffer penalties as well as enforcement. I think that enforcement is really the key. We need to obviously start by giving police officers something to enforce, but once that happens, we really need to make it a priority within the police department for them to follow through on what they can do. What I'm specifically concerned about is the overlapping of jurisdictions. I do something called LA Bike Trains, and one of my conductors who leads group rides was harassed by a highway patrolman. We've never had a problem with LAPD. They generally are better informed about the actual laws. But, I have all my conductors take one of the LACBC's Know Your Rights booklets, and what happens is, whether it's a police officer or a highway patrol, they actually have to inform the officer what the actual laws are. And if we didn't have that booklet, it's just a he said, she said situation. So what I would like to see is better enforcement, but also an education program, hopefully within both the LAPD as well as the Highway Patrol. And I think that if police officers even knew what they were or were not enforcing, we would be so much farther along.
Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you for your time. I think
You can start off, I'm sorry, with just your name.
My name's Mark Marin, cyclist and volunteer at Bicycle Kitchen. I think Los Angeles is a wonderful place to ride a bicycle. I just would love it if it was a safer place to ride a bicycle. I would like a motorist to prefer a DUI conviction rather than a hit-and-run conviction. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Don, morning.
Hi, my name is Don Ward. I was a member of the LAPD Bike Task Force, and on that task force we received actual statistics, and that was not included in this LAPD report, which I'm disappointed about. Also, and I'd like to submit that to you guys, what we're really talking about here is a civil rights issue, because we as pedestrians and cyclists have a right to be in the public space. We don't have to apply for a state-granted license to operate a machine. This is our right to be there. So I'd like to see, like my friends are talking about, I'd like to see this crime be elevated to, basically we're talking about robbery. If somebody hits me and leaves me for dead in the street, I am stuck with the medical bills. That's a robbery. It's a violent crime. It should be on par with that. He's talking about this officer, and we really appreciate the LAPD's protection. But if we're talking about, whether robberies are more important than hit and runs, I'm sorry, but you left me with a $30,000 medical bill. That's robbery. So let's see that elevated. There are things that the LAPD can do right now to improve their enforcement. One thing is that these crimes are being referred to the traffic division. The traffic division is way understaffed. These crimes should not be referred to them. They should be referred to detectives on the same par, once again, as crimes. And I'm seeing with, I know thousands of cyclists in Los Angeles, and I get youngsters calling me about what should I do, and I'm finding that the LAPD actually actively discourages these youngsters from filing a report. They'll tell you, oh, there's nothing that's going to come of this, you really shouldn't do anything. There's things like that the LAPD can improve and prioritize these crimes. Thank you. And I'd like to submit these to you guys. This is a great breakdown on the statistics.
All right, Don, thank you very much. Dan, we're not going to put your time on the clock because I asked you to come here actually as a guest of the committee, as an expert advocate as well. And I know you've testified many times on this in many different places and for good reason. So appreciate you coming here this morning as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, my name's Don Rosenberg. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, and my congratulations to the two new committee members. I hope it's congratulations.
It is. For all of us, let me tell you.
No, they may be good. They just may not want to do what they're
here for the right reasons.
After one Metro meeting, I understand what you're talking about.
I became an expert witness for all the wrong reasons. In November of 2010, my son was killed in San Francisco by an unlicensed driver. He wasn't killed by the hit, he was killed by the run. The driver tried to get away and drove back and forth over his body 3 times. I started to get involved in this issue, started to do some research, and very quickly found what a severe problem not just the state of California, but actually the United States has when it comes to unlicensed drivers or drivers driving on suspended and revoked licenses. I started testifying in Sacramento, testified numerous times in front of the Police Commission, testified last year in front of the Public Safety Commission. Was very heartened, Councilman Buscaino, to see your motion, because quite frankly, the police department does not give a damn about this. The report that they issued was a disgrace. No, it wasn't a disgrace. It was worse than a disgrace. It was an insult. The issue before us is hit and runs and all the damage and death they cause. And the first 15 pages of that report is nothing but comparing Los Angeles to other cities and trying to trash the LA Weekly on their report. The last page is recommendations, all weak recommendations, and recommendations that all take place after the fact. A month ago, I tried to testify in front of the LA Police Commission because I have data that's readily available to anybody from very reliable sources that clearly shows the nature of this problem. The data comes from the California DMV, the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, and the LAPD. And it has to do with who's causing the hit and runs. Where is this problem coming from? Is there one segment of the drivers that are causing this problem? The AAA report from 2011 had identified the fact that if you are driving on a suspended or revoked license, or if you do not have a license at all, you will flee the scene 35% of the time. That's 10 times more than a licensed driver. So I accumulated the numbers, how many drivers there are in licensed drivers in Los Angeles, how many are driving with suspended and revoked licenses, and how many are driving with no license at all. I'll give you this report. I do need to clear one thing up, and I'm going to give you the best case scenario on the numbers. The information I got from the DMV, I couldn't tell, and I haven't been able to get an answer from them, whether or not they subtracted out the suspended and revoked drivers from people with licenses, so they may be getting double counted. So I'm giving you the best case scenario.
If I could, and you can submit those, because I do want to allow time for the Q&A as well for the department. I actually have not only copies of all the reports that you've put together, I actually read them all.
Thank you.
And just on that front alone, just the statistic you just rolled out, in fact, you broke it down in your report in both categories. You assumed if they double counted or if they didn't double count. So I think you did a great job of breaking all that information down. More importantly, I think, or just as important, is why you're here today. And you took what has been the most horrific situation for a parent to lose a child and turn it into a passion of advocacy to try to prevent that from happening to another parent, to another human being.
This has become my life. I've essentially, I mean, it's still active. My consulting company is still active, but my only client is myself, and this is what I do pretty much 24/7. And I do it because if someone had done this before, maybe my son would be alive. But I have to tell you, it's extremely frustrating to go, particularly in front of the state legislature, and basically be told, we have no numbers to back up what we want to do. Your numbers, shove them in the toilet. They're worthless. Even though not only all the sources are significant sources, but some are California entities themselves. So if I can get to the bottom line, and then you can answer some questions. If you want to solve a problem, and this comes up in any business, anything, the first thing you have to do is recognize the problem. And if you don't, you're never going to solve it. Let me give you two numbers that recognize the problem. Drivers with suspended and revoked licenses and drivers that do not have a license at all constitute 20% of the people on the road. They cause 71.6% of all the hit and runs. And what's even more disconcerting about that is in most crimes, you don't know who the criminal is in advance. Here you do. These people are caught constantly driving without a license. They're given a slap on the ass and sent back out on the road, and they drive until they kill somebody or until they have serious injury to somebody. And even then, the guy who killed my son spent 43 days in jail because, and I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush because it's not the same, but for the most part, the police don't care, the district attorney and city attorneys don't care, the legislature doesn't care, the governor doesn't care, the attorney general doesn't care. They have repeatedly said over and over again, let's make it easier for these people to drive. It's political correctness run amok. And if you want to solve this problem or lessen the problem, if you don't attack this 20%, you're wasting your time. I'm a licensed driver. I'm one of the 2.3 million. If I get involved in a hit and run, the odds that you find me, unless I can't get away, are almost zero. You can extend the statute of limitations in perpetuity. I'd love to know how many hit and run drivers are caught 3 years after the collision. Probably none. And I want to give you just one other number, and then I'll let you ask whatever questions. There's a big problem in the court system, and I know the police can't do much about that. But there needs to be, at the very least, everything should be sent to the court system for what it should be. This is last year's statistics, there were 20,000 hit and runs, but 34,000 violations was 34,000.
If I could, I don't want to stop you. If you could submit all of this for the record as well.
Yes, I will.
We have about 10 minutes before council, but I want to make
Okay.
sure I know we've got more than that in questions. I also have very specific instructions that we're going to be asking of the department as well to bring it
Sure,
back to the
okay,
commission and come
no
back
problem.
to this committee.
If you have any questions,
But
I'm
more
happy.
importantly, I wanted to thank you for coming forward, for being the advocate that you've become, and all knowing certainly the reason you've done so, and appreciate all the work that you're putting into this.
Thank you.
Continue to work with our office. Thank you, Dan. Okay, with that, we'll ask the department to come back up if you could, and I know everybody's got a lot of questions. We want to try to narrow it down, if we could, to very specific instructions. I'll capture what other instructions. I've got several here as well that I'll go through and ask, and recommendations. But with that, we could...
If I could just, you all will have my contact information. Feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, my recommendation is to adopt the recommendations from the police department, this committee, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues because I know they had questions.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question about evidence that people gather about hit-and-run accidents. I know, for instance, that Don Ward here basically helped solve his own hit-and-run. A lot of folks in a hit-and-run now have the ability to take a quick photo or a video on their iPhones. How is the process for that to get into the investigative process? I've heard a lot of testimony about people saying that they don't feel like their cases are being taken seriously enough. How does that get to the investigating officer?
Well, anytime there's follow-up information, it becomes a priority case. It becomes a Category 1 case. And that evidence is retrieved during the interviews of witnesses. Witnesses are victims. And it all becomes part of the case file. So there shouldn't be anything left that has evidentiary value. It should all be collected, put in the case, and used to convict the perpetrator.
And who is the investigating officer? Is it a detective or is it someone from the traffic division?
Well, the traffic division has the traffic division follow-up investigators. So they could be detectives. They could also be police officer 3, trainees, training officers.
There could be a hit-and-run accident with potential evidence and it's being investigated by a trainee?
No,
a training officer.
Training officer,
Okay.
which is the same in detective divisions on
Right.
robbery tables, burglary tables, auto theft tables. It's the same thing.
Okay. I personally think that we need to be escalating this kind of stuff and have it investigated by detectives who are investigating robberies. You talked about clearance rates and that you would hope that clearance rates for robberies are higher than for hit and runs because it's a targeted crime, but a hit and run accident is also a violent crime, and I personally want to see it elevated in status. I just want to point out that I think one of our first priorities is to take care of the vulnerable. And in this case, in hit and runs, the most vulnerable are cyclists and pedestrians. I just want to say that in addition to the actions this committee is taking today, there's other things that the city needs to be doing. We need to do more to have complete streets in Los Angeles, and that impacts how we deal with development issues in our district. That deals with how we implement the bicycle master plan. We can't just slap sharrows down on the road. We need to have protected bike lanes so that people can drive safely in Los Angeles. So I'm going to support the recommendations that come forward. I also want to say that based on some of Dan's testimony, for me, it underscores some of the work that my colleague Mr. Cedillo has been doing, and we need to be issuing licenses to everybody in California who qualifies regardless of their immigration status.
Okay, I just have a question. How often does the LAPD catch people in the act of actually getting away, of fleeing? What's the percentage?
Well, the clearance rate for the cases where there is follow-up is 47%, so almost half.
Okay.
For all hit and runs, it's 20% of the time.
And of that percentage, the almost half, how many of those clearances have licenses or insurance?
I don't know that. Do you know that, Mike? You know that statistic? I don't think we have that statistic. The only other statistic that might help, not relative to your question, but of the 47% that are cleared, 38% get filed, meaning they they get prosecuted.
I would love to have that statistic, if it's possible, if you could maybe report back on that. And lastly, I just want to comment real quickly, and that is everything I do in terms of my initiatives for the public right-of-way, they're all about encouraging greater pedestrian activity, bicycling, and so I want to make sure that just we as a collective body are aware that the trend is to get more people out of cars and walking and biking everywhere. And I think we're doing bicycle lanes all over the place. And so I want to make sure there's not some sort of disconnect coming up where these undesirable percentages even increase because we're trending in that direction. I just think we all need to stay on top of where that's going, where we're heading in terms of multimodal transportation in Los Angeles in general.
I completely agree. I just would like to add, though, there still has to be accountability on the part of the bicyclists. For example, Ciclavia, when we do Ciclavia, we are totally supportive of that. We're closing roadways, facilitating movement, but critical mass is a whole other element. Critical mass is very... No, I'm just saying that.
We can't have comments from the...
I think there's some accountability and responsibility on both sides, and as I said earlier, a whole of government, whole of community approach to this is needed. Definitely, we need to do more enforcement. We need to do a better job of education and even re-engineering, but there's got to be a two-way street here. There's got to be an accountability and responsibility aspect to this, both from the suspect who does the hit and run, to be afraid to do a hit and run because they'll get prosecuted and convicted, and also the people that are walking the streets and riding the bikes.
And Chief Downing, I do not disagree with you at all on that, and I just really want to go after these hit and run drivers, just whatever we can do.
I do too. I definitely do.
But the typical cycling victim is not someone who's participating in critical mass, just to be clear.
Okay. So with that, I wanted to, let me wrap it up here, and I've got a number of recommendations that I'm going to make as well, but let me just make a closing statement. Since I didn't make an opening statement, I'll just close with it. As a chair of public safety, more importantly as a father, I take this very seriously. In fact, my daughter yesterday was out riding her bicycle, and I was like in panic mode just because she was out riding her bicycle. I came home from work last night, and I said to my wife, where's Lauren? She said, she's out on her bike. I said, oh my God, where? What's the path? Should we go drive it? Did she wear a helmet? Did she have her gear on? Is she wearing pants or shorts? It's riding a bike. I was in fear of her out there on the roadway on a bicycle. We've got to change the dialogue. We can sit here and look at statistics. The reports, I want to applaud the department because these reports are very difficult to put together. We can blast holes in them. We can rip them apart. We can say the statistics weren't done accurately. The fact is every single agency and every single department reports differently. So it's incredibly complicated. What we've got to do is change the dialogue moving forward. We have to change the lexicon. We have to looking at this as a crime. We've got to reshape and focus this on a public safety issue. And that's not pointing fingers. In fact, the department has done a terrific job. The problem is this problem has grown exponentially and continues to. And so we've got to refocus with this with a different lens from our perspective. And from that, we'd make the following recommendations. We'd ask that obviously we adopt the LAPD's recommendations. That can go forth immediately. But the following recommendations, we are going to ask the Police Commission to make the following policy changes. First and foremost, remove the word accident from hit and run reports. In statistics, let me just go through this real quick, that we never refer to hit and runs as accidents again as a city, that if it's a hit and run, it's a crime, and we report it as such. We also start writing all reports on hit and runs, not just on injuries, that we start gathering true data. And if we can write a police report for a lost cell phone, we can certainly write a police report for a hit and run. And so all hit and run reports will be documented by the department.
Councilman, we do, I think I may have caused some confusion. All hit and runs, they are a crime and they are all documented. The property damage only are the ones that aren't documented. But all hit and runs are documented today.
Okay, but what I'm talking about is the property crime, property only, even if there's not an injury.
If
Also,
it's a hit and run, we take it today.
with that though, I think it was stated earlier that if it's a property crime only, they're not.
No, property damage only.
Property damage only.
Property damage only, and it's a hit and run, it's still a crime, we take it.
Mhm. So, well, if we can get that information back then, and I think that the reports wasn't clear. It wasn't clear that that was what was in the reports or what was stated earlier. So we want to just make sure that that is in fact captured. We also ask that all of that information be and all those reports be put into ComStat, and they include for the ones that were solved that we can categorize those as well for unlicensed, suspended and revoked, DUI, property damage only, injuries, whether severe or minor, and fatalities, and we can have those broken out as well. We'd also ask that we look at additional enforcement options in education outreach. We can report back on what those possibilities could be. And then we're going to ask, we didn't do a deep dive in that on the impound. On Special Order 7, we haven't had a report back yet, but we do note that impounds are down dramatically. In fact, they're down half prior to Special Order 7. And so we're going to ask that that report, which was due back to this committee, be scheduled as soon as it's available and ready from the department to report back on what's happening with that and the criteria as well. With no objection, that'll be the order of this committee. So we'll go ahead and do that. Great. Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate you coming. Thank you.
And kudos to Mr. Buscaino and you, Mr. Chair, for your work on this.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thank you very much. With that, we had item 4 was a Yasi Grant. We're going to go ahead and move that forward. But what we're going to do is we'll schedule a verbal update on LA Rex on a status update. Part of that grant was contract for that for summer of 2013. As you're making your way out, since this is an echo chamber, we're still in the process of committee. If you can just, as you make your way out, just keep the voices down a little bit just so we can get through some of this. I really appreciate it. And again, I appreciate you all coming. We'll also bring back some of the cybersecurity elements, but we'll move the grant forward on item 4 and item 6, unless any of my colleagues have any questions. That will be the direction of the committee. Without objection, item 6, the Glenn Smith Hellespot, naming that, we'll go ahead and move that item without objection as well. That'll conclude all of the items for public safety, and that'll conclude the committee. We are adjourned. Thank you.